and is going to relate to exposures in utero. That's the only hypothesis I have. Whether it's going to be due to a specific chemical or a class of chemicals or not. And let me just say that this whole area is very difficult because it's difficult for trans people. And I totally understand that because it medicalizes their identity. It says, why are you like this? And we don't ask that generally, about, and it's similar concerns for people who have other atypical development, for example, ASD people and so on.
Right.
What causes that? Well, I'm not sure that question is yet. We've learned how to phrase that question in a way that does not make people feel that the way they are is the way they should not be.
Right.
And I don't want to give that impression.
Well, right, but it seems like at the same time, it's very important to study, especially when it relates to some of these chemicals that are in our everyday world. And when you talk about specifically the development of the sexual organs being stunted in utero, and these babies being born with ambiguous genitalia, not necessarily 100% developed with testosterone, or not 100% developed testicles or dropped testicles, you could imagine how that would translate to somebody being, or the way people describe, I feel like people say they're a male in a woman's body or a woman in a male's body, that I can see a connection there. But the thing is, you can't study it because you can't ask rats how they feel. You can't ask a rat, what do you feel like? Do you feel masculine or feminine?
Right.
So I'm definitely curious about that.
I think we're all curious about that.
Yeah.
And I think maybe, animal toxicologists will find some clever way to figure out what an animal's preference is. They can certainly already find out who that rat wants to have sex with. And they can produce rats, and as I told you, that males want to have sex with other males.
Really?
Yes. That can be produced with the pesticide we talked about before, atrazine.
Right. And this was a study that was done on fish and frogs as well, right?
Right. Frogs, particularly, yeah.
Frogs.
Right.
Oh, yes. They made homosexual frogs. And,
Right. So that is possible. But what that has to do with gender dysphoria is a really open question, and one that I think is very delicate, and we have to be careful about even asking without offending people.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, that we need some trans people to come in and do this research, because they will do it sensitively and they'll understand what the concerns are. And as non-trans, non-binary person, I'm afraid I'm, at risk of sticking my foot in it. You know what I mean? And saying things that will offend people. And so I'm being really careful.
Yeah.
Maybe you could have somebody on your show who's trans and would talk about it.
Yeah, well, it's hard, because serious academics like yourself, they don't want to talk about it because there's a very big risk of people coming after you or trying to discredit you in any way. And the problem with it is it does stifle discussion and research. Like you just said, you don't want to touch it. And that's a problem, I think.
I didn't say I didn't want to touch it. I said I didn't want to talk about it now because I don't know.
Right.
I can just tell you a study that I think would be relevant and that I think should be done. Right? And that's what I always do. I always think, how would we do this? And then I do it, right?
Right.
But this one is going to be hard. But it could be done. And there are databases in Europe and the United States where urine has been stored from a long time ago. And you could test that urine for environmental chemicals like phthalates or whatever, the bisphenols. We haven't talked about other classes, pesticides and so on. And then you could see, if you have a very large sample, how their children developed and what % of them were trans.